Bullshit.
Welcome back to the No BS Marketing Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Chuck Gounaris. He's a Vistage chair. He's a strategy guru who works with CEOs and executive teams on leadership, team building, personal and professional growth. He's passionate about predictive index. He's just a guy you want to listen to and learn from. So, Chuck, we're going to talk about Vistage.
Okay.
Vistage International, I'm just going to give my quick spiel. I think it's about one word, growth, and that's personal and professional growth. But you tell me what led you to Vistage and what keeps you there, and what do you think it's all about for our listeners?
Well, I was lucky. I had when I decided that I didn't think I wanted to go back into the big corporate world, because one of the things that I felt, particularly in the public company space, I felt like I was looking for something more meaningful, something more impactful. And I had a good friend here in Pittsburgh, Dan Stead is his name, as a matter of fact, and he introduced me to a Vistage chair at the time, Dick Singer, and I shared what I wanted to do. And Dick said, have you ever considered becoming a member of the Vistage organization, a chair within the Vistage organization? And I was aware of Vistage. I knew a little bit about it because I had some friends that were speakers in the Vistage circuit on strategy. And I hadn't. And he said, why don't you look into it? So I did. And I guess it was 3-4 months later, after going through the due diligence process, what I learned is a lot of what Vistage's success has been around growth, driven by values. And those values in particular were about fostering and enhancing a trusting environment, challenging one another, but doing it in a caring way. Had a lot of success. There's a reason why Vistage member companies grow 3 to 4 times faster than their peers in the industries that they're in. It's because they figured out a way to be able to get clear about vision, strategy, and how we work together, and then driving that down through the culture and executing. And if you can do those things, you grow. And I've seen it over and over again. And so I saw that initially, and it excited me because I felt like, hey, here's a place that I understand my values. And in fact, when I went to the training, which I think Vistage's training is some of the best in the world, out in San Diego, there were times, which was really awkward at times, there were times when I was sitting there listening to the impact the organization has had and how things happened, where I had tears in my eyes, because it just meant that much to me to find some place that I could connect with that way. And that I hope that answers your question. But that's
it does, and I want to talk a little bit about it. So talk about the Vistage model from the CEO group standpoint, and then we can dig in more after that.
Well, the key, I think, behind Vistage is really using a peer group. I like to call it a mastermind group in some ways, where you've got a diverse set of leaders, different people. You're looking for people who have different personalities, different experiences, and we're all working together for one benefit: to drive growth at a personal and professional level. We want to make better decisions. And we want to have better results, and by becoming better leaders. So that's what we're all about. And so the model works where, we meet once a month for a full day. We'll bring speakers in on key topics that are really transformational to growth within the business, anywhere from strategy to executive team development to HR-related kind of topics to leadership, general leadership topics. And a whole variety of other factors to kind of jog our thoughts, help us to see a perspective that's beyond what our own limited perspective is all about, and see what can we grab out of that we could apply in our business experience, in our businesses, and drive growth. And then we work together in a confidential manner to help address issues that each of us are having, to be able to think about it in different ways as to how do we get around those issues, how do we work through those issues to be able to get back on track to growth. And it's just a successful model. It's a very successful model. So we meet once a month as a group. Once a month I meet as a chair with the member, and we're just digging all the time to try to understand how clear are we, how aligned are we around the direction that we're going in, what are the issues that are in the way, and how do we work through them. So
a couple of things that I'll point out to the listener. Throughout my career, I was big on personal professional growth for me and my entire team and any organization I was a part of. So I love, they're coming to get us. They're coming to get us. So someone that's a BS marketer, they're mad. So I was very involved in going to a lot of seminars, conferences, networking, and just trying to get better. And then I try to do the same with my team. So what happened after I went up the ranks, had a really enjoyable career trajectory, decided to start my own company. So you start your own company and you get into that and you forget how much you did of that personal growth stuff when you were at a company that paid for it, and now it's your bottom line, and you're like, well, do I really want to spend 10 grand to go here? Do I want to join that for 5 grand? Do I want to go to this networking event for that reason? Mm-hmm. And so once I made the leap to Vistage, it got me back to being able to do what I was able to do when I was at those bigger companies, as far as having a group you could trust, but also that the speakers are fantastic and the workshops are great. Talk a little bit about issues processing, because I've used that issues processing model with my team when we have an issue. Talk about what happens when you have a group, because this was difficult for me. And Chuck, full disclosure, is our Vistage chair. And issues processing is tough when you bring your own company's issue into the group and you've got to talk about it.
You know, the one thing that I think that comes to mind in a significant way is in business, the issue named is the issue solved. So you better be clear, very clear about what the real issue is, because I see a lot of organizations, leaders in organizations spending time to solve an issue that's just superficial and it isn't really the root issue. So we have a process that we teach our members, and then the chair enforces and drives to be able to help one another get to the root of what the issue is. And I can't go through that,
Sure.
because, it's all part, it's all part of the Vistage experience, but the process
suffice it
works.
to say, in the middle of an issue, when someone gets up and presents their issue, suffice it to say, in the middle of an issue, the chair or even a member will just say, what's the issue?
Yeah.
And it's rarely what they had originally put on paper or on their PowerPoint deck.
You're exactly right. And the thing that I think is really important, and I'll add this just as a dimension of the Vistage experience, is that the growth is both at the personal level and business level. One thing that I liked at Vistage was to recognize the fact that you can't grow a business if you're not growing personally. They're interconnected. They're very interconnected. So I think that our members grow as individuals, and they are able to then bring that into their business experience and apply it that way as well.
So you have these monthly meetings, Suzanne, where the chair meets with the CEO. Now, this isn't the case with me, but these other CEOs you meet with, they have egos.
Is that right?
So everybody else in our group has egos, and so now you got to meet with these crazy CEOs who all have had a career path like yours. They're successes. The people in our group, I look at them, I say, "Wow, she did this, he did that." You walk through this, and now you're meeting with them monthly, and you're basically kind of being like their chairman of their board.
Yeah, chairman of the board.
Talk about the difficulties of that and how you have to work through some challenges.
Well, I think that there's a couple things that I could share with you immediately, because again, it was like the newness when I first became a chair. The first couple of years it was more intense, and off and on it's very similar, right? Because at one point I used to think it was pretty challenging when I worked for one company. I had one vision, one strategy that I had to work with. And now, typically, I have 32 to 36 members between the two chief executive groups that I have. And then I have a key executive group, which are the direct reports of that. So the one-to-ones are with the chief executives. And so there can be 32 different visions and strategies and growths and cultures. And what I used to think was complicated at IBM or EDS or whatever, sometimes my head's spinning whenever I'm dealing with 32 different companies and what's going. But we're always trying to get to the same matter. What's really the underlying issue that's getting in the way of your ability to grow? And how do we best go at that? How do we best solve that matter? And does that help me here?
Yes,
sure I'm on track with what
you're right on track. I think that the biggest opportunity I wanted to give you was a chance to talk about Vistage, because I would just say it is life-changing. I think that you can go along and you're doing things well and you're having a good life.
Yeah.
And you think you're this growth company, and then really you're a lifestyle company, and you might want to become a growth company sometimes, not everybody, but I'm talking about personal experience. So, you don't have someone holding you accountable, and
that's a great point.
And a lot of the CEOs like myself, we're self-starters, so we think that's okay. But I forgot that I had at UPMC, I had someone telling me, hey, come here, do this, work on that. And so you lose that.
I've had the opportunity. I did some due diligence before I got involved with Vistage, and I actually traveled around the country, met with a number of members, talked to a number of chairs, because the thing that really caught my interest is that the average member was a member for 6 to 8 years. And I thought, why is that? Because, presidents and CEOs don't spend time on things like that if they're not getting value out of it. And when I went around, I heard these 4 or 5 themes that were kind of over and over again as to why they were involved. Just making better decisions faster, was a big theme that I heard. Accountability, right? Both being held accountable and helping to drive a culture of accountability, very big. Growth on a personal and professional level was the third one. Isolation relief was the fourth item, which is having a confidential environment where there wasn't a vested interest by anybody else in the group. The vested interest was really, hey, I care about you, Dave, and we want to help Mass Solutions to be able to grow. So what do you want to do with that? How do you get, where do you want to take it? Let's talk about the best way to get there, et cetera. And the last piece was managing change. So those 5 things, I think, are the big things that members get out of the experience that help drive the growth engine.
Awesome. So we are on the No BS Marketing Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. That's Chuck Gounaris, our guest today. He's a Vistage chair and a leadership executive coach, strategy guru, all about culture and getting to the root of how a company can grow. So when we talk about messaging, you gave a great answer earlier about marketing. When it comes to messaging, we talk about the 2 whys at Mass Solutions. Simon Sinek had this great book about the why, your reason for being. And I read that book and I thought, that's part of it from a marketing standpoint. But from a marketing standpoint, you have to ask, what's our why, our reason for being? But then what's your customer's why, their reason for buying? Mm-hmm. You then need to crystallize those 2 answers into one big idea, one memorable message or theme that makes an emotional impact on our target audiences. So this could be for your company, Gounaris Associates. This could be for Vistage, or it could just be your life vision. What's the big idea?
Well, I think the big idea for me, I shared with you earlier, right? For me, it was about recognizing that leadership is the transforming power that changes the trajectory of organizations and the lives of people who work for them. So I feel like, unlike any of my previous roles, if I'm able to help any one of you that are, and it's not just me, it's me and the group, because it's the combination of the chair and the group. If we're able to help one of our members be able to see a path that he didn't see and really drive growth, not only does that member benefit from that, but everybody that's a part of that organization also benefits from that. And that's my big idea, is just this idea that the ability to drive transformation is a team effort. And it doesn't have to be a team effort that's exclusively restricted just to within the 4 walls of your organization. It can be really fostered and driven by peers. In fact, former CEO of Vistage, Leon Shapiro, just came out with a book that talks a little bit about it. It was just released. It's just being released now, called The Power of Peers.
We're going to get that on the show notes so our listeners can get that. Talk about the book.
What he's sharing is just his experience of why has Vistage managed to get to 20,000 members in 16 or 17 countries, and now is 55 years old and has this track record of being able to outperform outperform their peers within their various industry groups. And it's really the power of peers. It's the power that comes about by bringing together people who care deeply about wanting to help one another, being present and engaged, and really working at it. That's what makes the difference, Dave.
That's a great big idea. And to tie back to Vistage, it's the largest CEO organization in the world for personal and professional growth for CEOs and their companies. He talked about the 5 things that the surveys show that we as CEOs love about Vistage. Yeah. Gives us more accountability, better, faster decision-making, growth, personal and professional for us and the people on our team, isolation relief, we're not alone on an island, and managing change helps us manage change.
Right.
Great stuff about Vistage. So I got one more thing. Well, no, I'm going to go to your tour tip and see what you might say is your tour tip, because it might lead to our next discussion. If not, I'll bring it up next. Mm-hmm. So you have to pick a tool or tip you'd offer that'll help our audience tell their story, craft their message, or communicate to internal and external target audiences. It could be A tool like Google Trends to generate content ideas could be your favorite book. The Power of Peers maybe is your favorite book now. A blog like Light Reading, which I know is your favorite, or a productivity resource. Or it could even be a tip on how to approach their career, whatever you think might help our listeners.
Well, I think that really, I guess the thing that I think that really would help listeners is I think back and I discover repeatedly is a challenge that becomes a barrier to growth. You know, there's a lot of research that's been done over the last 100 years as to what are the barriers to growth for most organizations. Through Vistage, I've learned that by far the number one barrier to growth is leadership. It's the ability to be able to be clear and drive alignment within the organization as to a vision. Where are we all going? Second piece, what's the best way for us to be able to get there? That's strategy, in my view. So end game, where are we heading? Vision. Strategy, how do we get there? And then execution, which is really what kind of systems and structure and behaviors do we need within our organization to really be a high-performing organization and get to that end game? So if that were the tip, I would give it that way. I'd tell you that I really like Pat Lencioni as an author. He's spoken at Vistage events in the past. I would say that one book that I would highly recommend to folks who want to understand this concept a little more is called The Advantage. And he talks about a discipline that deals with building a leadership team, creating organizational clarity, over communicating that clarity message, which marketing, by the way, I find is really interesting in that the messaging side of marketing isn't just external, it's also internal within the organization, because people need to understand why what they do matters and connect with that and feel good about that. And I think that that's a really important piece. And then lastly, it's the human systems. How do we reinforce the direction that we're heading in the form of how we manage goals, how we manage performance, kind of behaviors that we expect? And I think Pat has written many books. One of the latest ones is this one called The Advantage a couple of years ago on the New York Times bestseller list. Really does a nice job summarizing it.
Well, you just hit on something that I think that we should go down this path a little bit, because you talked about the human element of it and behaviors and energizing. And you and I just came from a meeting with Dan Corser, the regional PI Grand Poobah predictive index. And so we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about something you and I are both passionate about, is predictive index and how that can help with personal and professional growth.
Yeah, yes, you're exactly right. I mean, I got to meet Dan because I was a member of his Vistage group prior to becoming a chair, and I really learned a ton of things along that way. And he introduced PI, had all of us that were members take the PI survey. Didn't take very much time, and the real benefit that he got into is, hey, if you become more self-aware, you can begin to learn where your real strengths are, a little more about where your strengths are, where your limitations might be. And it helps you understand, how do I surround myself with people who are going to be able to really accelerate my strengths and shore up my weaknesses. I mean, that's just one facet of it. It's very significant in that regard. So what I learned is that it really helped. It used to take years to think about, do I have the right person in the right seat? And now, given the science that's behind a tool like Predictive Index, I'm able to, in fairly short order, in a matter of a couple of months, really begin to get a sense of there's two dimensions that make for somebody's success. A cognitive set of skills, like, do I know how to do what I'm doing? I mean, I know you are an expert in marketing, for example, just like you keep calling me a guru in strategy. Thank you, by the way, for that. But there's a cognitive side. You got to know something. You have to have had some experience. But there's a behavioral side that is equally as important. In fact, maybe even more important, because given the responsibilities that somebody has within an organization, or the accountabilities that somebody has in an organization, you've got to have the right behavioral profile in addition to the know-how to really drive execution and for somebody to be fully engaged. And when you think about it, the work that's out in those that study employee engagement are basically saying it's something like 30 to 40% of all employees are really engaged in the workforce. They don't make a connection between what they're doing and how it fits into the organization. So PI, I thought, was a really great way to help figure out, is there a behavioral component of this that's creating that mismatch? Is there a cognitive component that's creating that mismatch? And over the last number of years, as I've been working with it, it's just amazing. And I think you can testify to that too, as to how valuable it is in being able to figure out, do I have the right person in the right seat? And then if you get that right, you get a lot more engagement, you get a lot more productivity, and you get a lot more results.
It's what I love about it is it's about what energizes us and what de-energizes us. Mm-hmm. And that's a big piece of what it's about. It's about a number of things, but that's the most important to me because I am so vested in making sure anyone around me is getting the most out of the experience.
Yeah.
Whether it's when I'm Mass Solutions, whether it's when I'm coaching with our AAU program and our travel programs, whether it's my personal life, I want to see people at their best. So like known Suzanne so long that we both know each other so well that we sort of knew what PI told us, but then PI told us a little bit more, and it helps you to put people in a place where you change your behavior to help them.
Yeah.
I jokingly give the Mike Gadd example. I'm a big, intense guy. Everybody knows I jump around, come up with ideas. I was interrupting him 20 times a day, and that says right in his PI, don't interrupt this guy. So I had to change that. So I think predictive index is just really an amazing thing, and it takes 5 minutes or less to take the survey, and the results are quickly come to you, and you can be coached on it, and it can help you a lot.
So one of the things that's really powerful about PI, and we talked about this in a way, is that it's behavioral based. And when you think about one of the elements that's critical to driving execution within an organization is culture. And culture is really behaviors. What are the behaviors that are important in my organization? And to a large extent, if it's a private, closely held organization, it's kind of those things that mattered a lot to the owner-founder, why they formed the business and set it up. And certainly you want to try to attract and bring people in that resonate with that care about that, because that's what's going to drive engagement. And you're working together, and it's a lot more fun that way than ever you got people that are involved that don't see it the way that you see it. Exactly. It's a big problem. So PI is wonderful in that regard. It just gives you a really good look under the hoods, and we all see the worldview, as we call it, right? What we look like on the outside, but PI gives you a look under the hood so that you can see what motivates somebody, and how do they, and how is the environment that they're currently working in either energizing them or draining them. And it's helpful. If you know that insight, you can make some changes.
I look back at my career and I know exactly when things happen that drain me at various companies. But Chuck, it's now time to keep calm and hit the bullseye. I'll ask you to choose between two marketing or messaging classics. Tell me which one you like more, but you only have a few seconds to choose and hopefully hit the bullseye. Are you ready?
I guess I have no idea what's coming.
I'll tell you what it's not. That's what it's not. Right. Geico's gecko or the Aflac duck?
The Aflac duck. I have no idea what I answered that to.
Well, which one do you like better from a messaging standpoint?
Oh, I like the
gecko.
Yeah, I like the gecko. I like the gecko, actually, the one I like best. Yes.
What makes you like him?
Well, I just think that he's just very clear with what it is that he's talking about, and the different examples and how things go around. It's just, you understand it. It's simple, it's clear, it's to the point, and you connect with it.
So now
it's cute too. It's kind of got it's got a appeal to it. All of those do, but that one I kind of like.
Two classic positioning statements, slogans: "Don't leave home without it," or "Priceless." American Express, "Don't leave home without it," or MasterCard, "Priceless."
I like "Don't leave home without it." I actually like "Priceless" too. That's a tough question because both of them kind of have
That's why it's hit the bullseye. It's hard. It's not supposed to be easy.
"Priceless" is interesting in the sense that it. But I'm an Amex guy, so I don't leave home without it. Why? Because it organizes all of my expenses. It summarizes it around, and for the most part, I'm able to use it just about everywhere. And they're great customer service. So when I think about it, "Don't leave home without it," I guess speaks to me from the standpoint of service. I'm going to get service, and that's the brand I guess that they built around it. So I'm going to go that way. That's
perfect. So Progressive's Flow or Jake from State Farm.
I am. I don't know. The Jake they're both interesting, but I guess I kind of like the Jake from State Farm piece just a little bit more.
Good.
Than the other. And I think it's just because it's fun. They kind of are getting, particularly the wife that's coming down at the end of the middle of the night. And who are you talking to? And he's answering all the questions in about as monotone a voice as he can. And she's like, sure, yeah, right. And it's like, it's Jake from State Farm. It's just kind of funny. And it sticks with you. The emotional connection around the message stays with you. I mean, I hadn't thought about that commercial. You just asked me all these things, and it's just what comes to mind.
See, Seuss, he was fighting it. He was fighting it. It was outside of his PI. He wanted to be completely prepared. You already talked about Lencioni, so we're going to talk about two other management leaders, writers, gurus, Tom Peters or Jim Collins.
Well, I've read both, and I like Jim Collins quite a bit. I particularly like because Jim did the research that talked about the difference and distinction between what separates good companies from great companies. And when you get down into it, and he looked at 1,000 companies and sifted that all down, and it boiled down to, it was one of the beginning big insights around the leadership continuum, right? Level 5 leadership came out of that work.
Get the right people on the bus.
Get the right people on a bus, hold people accountable, and then drive execution in
Created
terms of where
the term
you're going.
BHAG.
He did because it's the big, hairy, audacious goal, right? To me, that's the vision. That's where we want to go. The only difference is in his articles, and he wrote back in the days when they were looking back, it was 20 years out, 30 years out. I think in the rapid change that we're experiencing today in a global economy, 5 years out is a pretty reasonable time to be thinking about. Although
3 might be more realistic.
3 to 5 is a good window. There still are those that are big deals, that are going to take longer than that. But for most companies that are, under $100 million, which is a majority of the companies in the United States, a majority of them, that's fine. 5 years is pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lay's Bet You Can't Eat Just One or Doritos for the Bold?
That's funny because I still remember the Lay's Bet You Can't Eat Just One from many, many years ago. I don't even know if that's on TV any longer. It's the Doritos is really the one that drives it. I like both, but I remember the Lay's Bet You Can't Eat Just One. It's so good.
So now we're going to go and compare two amazing men for the last one. And so this one's going to go back to the $6 million man or the most interesting man in the world.
I always like the $6 million man, and it's just because it integrates technology with humanness, which when I think about it, I'm a systems guy. I told you back at the very beginning, what always intrigued me was systems, not information system, but systems, how people work together, how people led. Information systems fit into that. So because you could get a system humming, you can get the results. You can kind of get there. And the $6 million man was a combination of systems, and you got him humming, and he was really great. And I just like the fact that he kind of had a little superhero component to him as well.
Now, knowing Chuck's PI, he wanted to know exactly what everything was. So the bullseye freaked him a little bit. But wasn't he fantastic? He was fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Fantastic. So now, Chuck, we go into the next part that's called the sights and sounds of marketing. So when I began doing light reading 8 or 9 years ago, light reading being light in that you can read in 2 minutes or less, and light that shine bright ideas for you. And it was a blog post I started 8, 9 years ago, and I would do every third or fourth post, I would do a song where I would repurpose the song and apply it to leadership, communication, strategy, messaging. And with the podcast, I decided to make that the sights and sounds, and we would take the song that I repurposed and we'd go over that, talk a little bit about that, but then we'd take the year that it came out in and look at what was happening in that year and go back the big messaging hits or misses from that year.
Okay.
So the song that we took from this year was actually when my son Alec, he's my oldest, I have 3 sons, Alec, Brevin, Carter. Yes, I did it on purpose. Dave and Darlene, ABCD. Made it easy for me. I never had to worry about anybody remembering a name. So my son Alec was in either 5th or 6th grade, and he was already he's been passionate about logos and branding since he was a baby. It's comical. But he came in and said, Dad, I think you should use this for one of your light reading songs. So I'm going to use a song that I know you listen to a lot because it's Workin' by Young Dre.
Okay.
And the
so
Truth.
far, I don't know what you're
Young
talking
Dre and the Truth featuring Good Charlotte. But the year was 2008. So I'll start off going through a couple lyrics.
Okay.
And I'll repurpose. I'll explain my interpretation of those lyrics. Then we'll have some fun with it. So the first lyric is, listen now, can you picture a boy with dreams bigger? Why not aspire for more, something you believe in? The second lyric, seen it, made it from wishing, always I had a mission. Driven people overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. Another lyric is, never a 9 to 5, I'm a dreamer with so much drive. The common theme is set goals, plan, commit, fight through the negatives, all the stuff Chuck's been talking about today. Young Dre comes back with, the truth came from nothing, my spirit struggled to make a living. Regular people taking on their fears, as you mentioned, and moving past being humbled, do special things. People that go through those challenges end up doing special things. They're regular people doing special things. The lyric is, troubled, my heart is fearless in my term of endearment. It's fearless right when you hear it. While it bumps in the road, keep you from driving where you want to go. You might not become the next big thing, but you can stretch your goals and achieve real success defined by you. I talk about that a lot. Define success. You define your success. Right. The lyric, they don't get it, nah. When you've got it, nope. That's my little rap. Your friends and loved ones might even question your methods and goals. The lyric is, when you know it, yeah, they can't stop it. Because sometimes we're held back by what we want approval from those around us. If you have the self-confidence, you can persevere and make the extraordinary happen. The lyric is, haters can't stop my shine. I was destined to write these lines. They gonna hate it, but they never gonna forget it. The naysayers will try to raise doubt. In the end, it doesn't matter. The song says they don't want to know the truth. Hard work and the willingness to sacrifice make the difference. The song ends with, the truth is, I'm working my whole life long. That was submitted by a very young Alec Mastovich. Chuck, your thoughts on the theme of working by Young Dre, The Truth, featuring Good Charlotte?
Well, I guess what I heard, a couple things that connected with me, was the idea of what's in your mind. And you asked me earlier, what's one of the biggest learnings? And I guess maybe it's a good point to end on based on this piece of music. What I've come to recognize is what you believe and conceive and can conceive, you can achieve. That's that yes. phrase we've all heard. It sounds kind of trite, but it just came to mind, but it's so real. I mean, the challenge that many of us have is really more about what's between our two ears than anything else. But if you can get clear, about your vision, what do you want? I love this. We had a Vistage speaker a while back who came over and talked a little about this, right? And said that there's 2 of the 3 most important questions we ever have to answer in our lives are, what do I want? And what's the best way to be able to get there? So what resonated with me out of that is a little bit of the sense of saying, if I know what I want, and if I can figure out a way to be able to get there. I mean, I didn't understand a whole lot of the rest of it, but that part I got.
Well, I'm going to play it for you, Chuck. We'll play it for you later.
All right.
So other sights and sounds of 2008 include Michael Phelps wins a record 8 gold medals and earns nearly $7 million in endorsements. So why do we bring that up on a No BS marketing show? He obviously has some marketing skills. He had people around him. He was able to turn that into endorsements. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about Michael Phelps and how he turned that into endorsements and messaging?
Well, I know that there were some challenges with him at the end, and that he's kind of now worked through that. But for the most part, what my thoughts on Michael Phelps were: here's a guy who was really driven towards wanting to accomplish something. Going back to the theme that we've been talking about, he just was really driven. He put in the work. He had a game plan or a strategy as to how he was going to get it done, and then he just worked it, and he worked it, and he worked it.
He was working like the song.
Yeah, he was working like the
Chuck,
song.
Man, he's rapping it. Young Dre.
And I need a little music here in the background. I can make it even better. But at any rate, he worked it, and then I think you're right. I think as with anything today, right? You can't get there as an individual any longer. You really have to be a part of a team. And that team, in my view, is made up, if you're in an organization, with other people that are in your organization or other organizations through some type of an alliance. But people who share a vision in some way can really do a lot in terms of being able to achieve.
Another Sights and Sound of 2008, a sad one. Tim Russert, host of NBC's Meet the Press, passes away suddenly. And there's two issues here. Tim Russert as a messaging guy and Meet the Press as a messaging forum. Your thoughts?
That's hard. What I remember is because I saw Meet the Press, was every Sunday, right? For many, many years growing up, it was on television, and I guess what it really boiled down to is that it would just be a way of surfacing kind of the big issues that were out in the world at the time. So you'd always kind of at least have some level of awareness around that. I guess when I think about Tim Russert, it would be with him and as well as a number of other people that were in that kind of role, right, is that their value came about as a result of the questions that they could ask and draw out insights that the rest of us wouldn't think about. I thought that was pretty powerful.
He was great interviewer. And the show itself, even down to the dun, 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 the way the song closes and the way it opens for the show to begin, just great messaging. As you said, it's iconic.
Yes.
2008 was another election year. And
I thought I was done.
And yet, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Is introduced as candidate Barack Obama's campaign slogan. And we learned about Joe the plumber. So let's talk a little bit about how in an election cycle, messaging makes the difference. Yes, we can sure beat Joe the plumber.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember the words Joe the plumber, but I don't remember anything at all about it. And the yes we can was just a very simple theme, to mobilize people to say that the impossible can be possible. That's how I look at it, and it comes back to the same thing that we've been talking about here through this whole interview. Growth might be difficult, but yet it's possible, and a lot of it is about the mindset and about the direction that you're heading in and who you surround yourself with. It's that same type of thing. And I think that's what Obama did in that particular instance. That was his theme. And it helped, I guess, him to kind of mobilize a following to kind of move towards his win back in those days.
And I think right now there's not a singular message that's resonating in the 2016 election.
Right.
And that's why you've got two candidates fighting in the Democratic side and probably 3 or 4 fighting on the Republican side. And you have someone like Trump who has a little bit better messaging than everybody. And so he's soared to the top.
Right.
But he's so unconventional that might not last. And messaging means so much in who runs the country.
I think you're exactly right.
So we're going through the sights and sounds of the year 2008. We're going to tailor it to our audience, Suzanne. The primetime comedy series Chuck comes back for a strong second season. Chuck, please tell me you were a fan of this TV show, Chuck.
I think I saw it once or twice, thank God, so therefore I can't comment much.
There you go. He loved it. He loved it. So, Chuck, on the No BS show, Chuck, how can listeners contact you if they'd like to learn more about what you do?
Well, obviously, they can get a hold of me through you, if that would be the case. Or I'm happy to give you a phone number.
What about your LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is a great way. That's a good way. And my contact information and all that is available on LinkedIn.
We'll put it all on the show notes.
That's excellent. Thank you.
That way anyone can get to you. Chuck, thanks for being on the show. It was a pleasure.
That was great. I really enjoyed it. Although I was pretty nervous about coming here, I really enjoyed it.
What made you nervous?
You.
Absolute bullshit.
Thanks for joining us for the No Bullshit Marketing Podcast. Visit boldsolutionsnobs.com for show notes plus additional marketing and messaging resources. Or you sign up for light reading, you'll receive valuable strategies every other week to improve your marketing and transform your message. It really is light, intended to be read in 2 minutes or less, and it just might trigger bright ideas for you. To sign up, visit masssolutions.biz. That's B-I-Z. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions.